Now it is my pleasure to introduce Landi Maduro. Thank you, yes. Landi is our keynote speaker. She's an award-winning writer, director, and producer who has worked in the film industry for over 10 years. She launched her own production company called Blue Child Entertainment in 2012. She's the director and producer of The Silent Killer, Prostate Cancer in the African American Community, which we will be showing later this afternoon at 4 p.m. right in this room. So we want you all to stick around. Hopefully you don't have flights to catch. You've got time to attend the movie because it's great. Landi has been a major advocate for prostate cancer awareness and has been awarded the Zero Impact Award for her work. She's a great partner of ours. Like we love working with her, and we do film events across the country, and she's always like, what do you need? Here's access to the film, and the community really reacts to it. So we're so excited that you get to see it later this afternoon. She's a board member of the Massachusetts Prostate Cancer Coalition, and she's a Blue Earth Diagnostics patient ambassador. Landi, it's so great to have you join us today.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope, oh yes, I love it. You speak back. That's awesome. I hope you guys are enjoying the retreat. I saw some massages going on last night. It was fun to connect with some of you last night. I hope, what I'm going to share will be an inspiration to some of you as I kind of share a little bit about my story. So the day I learned my father was diagnosed with prostate cancer, I just had the strangest sensation wash over me. So I happened to be at a happy hour catching up with an old friend I hadn't seen in years, and my dad calls, and it's super noisy, so I thought I heard what he said, but I wasn't 100%, so I was like, Dad, I'm gonna call you back. And he goes, I have prostate cancer. It was like all of a sudden, it was like in a movie, and of course I'm dramatic because I'm a filmmaker. So to me, it's like it got quiet, and it was like, I have prostate cancer, is all I heard. So then I step outside, and he tells me his diagnosis, that it's stage 1, low Gleason score, and that he has options. And I go back in the restaurant, and my friend is like, are you okay? Like, clearly my facial expression must have been crazy. And she just, was like, are you okay? And I said, my dad just told me he had prostate cancer. And it was so surreal because I was just sitting there telling her how I'd been doing research to do a film about prostate cancer in the African American community. How crazy is that? And so I felt like, what am I doing sitting in this restaurant, right? Like I should be doing something, but what am I gonna do? There's nothing I can do in this moment, but it felt weird now. Even though moments ago I was just laughing and we were talking and I was sharing, and now I felt like I need to go, or I need to do something. I need to be moving. I shouldn't be here laughing. My dad has cancer. It's weird how our brains work. How we feel like we have to do something to reassure our loved one or to make them feel better. That we feel we have to push down our own anxiety and our own fear and comfort them, or say some type of words of comfort, or do something. When anyone hears those words, I have cancer, we feel like it's something we have to do to fix it. Creating the documentary became my way to not only help my dad, but all men that were dealing with prostate cancer. I wanted them to know that they had options, and in gathering facts, I found power. I shared what I learned with my dad and helped him by making sure he was able to ask his physician educated questions, so he felt more in control. I often joke that at this point, I knew more about my dad's prostate than he did. And I'm not sure how much he liked that, but I knew he appreciated he had a daughter who was able to give him the knowledge he needed and support him. And I learned a few things through this whole process. One, that bravery runs deep. I saw it in my dad as he faced each test and each doctor's appointment. That knowledge is power, and having the right information can make all the difference. And that self-advocacy is vital. You must ask questions, push for options, and make your voice heard. As caregivers, to our loved ones, our loved ones often lean on us, right, to make sure that they get all the information from the physician, right? It's difficult to hear past those words, "You have cancer." So somehow, as caregivers, we have to be their eyes and ears. I heard earlier talking about, keeping a notebook, keeping track of everything. We have to decipher all that crazy medical terminology and help make sense of it. But what happens when you have a loved one who is not forthcoming with everything their doctor says? What if they tell you they have prostate cancer, but they won't tell you what stage they are? Or they don't want you to go to their doctor's appointments? Or they choose a treatment option that makes you nervous or that you don't want them to choose? How do you maneuver when they won't let you in? You do the only thing you can do. You listen. You let them know you're here for them. If they refuse treatment, you do your best to respect their choices. It may mean you just sit and watch a movie together. Maybe you cry together. Maybe you give them space. Maybe you hold them if they need to physically feel how much you love them. I know sometimes it does not feel like enough. It feels like you should be doing something. But sometimes people just need time to process in the only way that they can. And you can offer support by just letting them know you're there for them. Since my dad had stage 1 and a low Gleason score, he chose active surveillance. Now, I'd been doing research, as I mentioned, on the documentary, and I understood why he made the choice he did, but I wanted him to get that cancer out of his body. I was terrified it would spread, and he would not maintain getting his biopsies I think he had to do every 6 to 12 months, and he absolutely hated it, but yet he would not choose to take the cancer out. And so it just made me nervous that at some point he's going to decide, I'm done doing this. But he did agree to be in my documentary. So those of you who stay and watch it later tonight, you'll get to see who my father is. And he agreed to share his journey, which that definitely made me proud. In 2018, my Uncle Adrian, my dad's brother, was put on hospice after a 4-year battle with renal cancer. My uncle and dad were really close. They never lived more than 20 miles away from each other. And as you can imagine, this took a huge toll on our family. I was really worried about how this would affect my father's health. That Thanksgiving, my siblings and I decided to go home and to Washington State, where I'm from, and spend time with my dad and uncle. I decided to stay at my aunt and uncle's house because I wanted to be close to my uncle. My uncle is the biggest jokester. He loves cracking jokes and I always enjoyed being around him. And so I was like, I want to spend as much time as I can with him. And what I didn't know is how much my Aunt Deanna needed me. Aunt Deanna was his tireless caregiver. She embodied resilience. She researched every treatment option. She knew every nurse's name. She spent sleepless nights by his side. But caregivers need care too. And sometimes they're so focused on giving support, they forget to breathe for themselves. That's why events like this Zero Prostate Cancer Retreat is so important. It's vital. This offers that sanctuary. I know some of you felt it last night. I saw the list in line for massages, and I was like, go. I know how much you need that, right? It's this community who understands that exhaustion, that grief, and that fierce, selfless love that drives you all forward. And I'm just so amazed by all of you. I feel like I am just a passenger watching all this awesome stuff that you do for your loved ones. And it just blows me away. Both my dad and my uncle are social dynamos. They love to laugh, talk with family and friends. If either one of them were here, they would talk your ear off. They got stories for days. And even though my uncle was very sick and on hospice, he wanted to see every person on the face of the planet that wanted to see him. He wanted to laugh and joke until the very end. So while I was in town, I helped my aunt get him dressed in the mornings and ready for guests. My uncle pulled energy from every person who stopped by. He was in high spirits, laughing and joking. But during the night, he would moan and cry out in horrible pain. His hospice bed was set up in the living room, so my aunt slept on the couch so she could quickly jump to his side if he needed her. I'm sure it was hard for her to allow all those people to come in and out of their house those last few weeks of my uncle's life. She could have thought, you know what, I need to just keep him comfortable and make sure he's okay and, keep people away from him so that he could just rest. But that's not what he wanted. And so, if it meant keeping him happy was to suffer at night so that he can have enjoyment in the day, then they both suffered at night. She wanted someone with him 24/7, so I told her, take a break, go run some errands, relax, I'll stay with him. That night, when she got home, after finally taking a couple of hours for herself, I refused to let her do anything. I told her, you watch TV, I poured her a glass of wine, I told her to relax. She slept so hard, I could not wake her up. I was scared. I was like, oh my God. Okay, I need you to wake up though, Adriana. She was like, it's your fault. You did this, right? But she was emotionally and physically exhausted. She was tired beyond that place that sleep could actually help, right? But yet she never said anything. She never complained. She never stopped moving. And me being there just took that weight off for just a few days while I was in town. My aunt was doing what I call actively grieving. We knew my Uncle Adrian didn't have much longer to live, and she didn't want to accept that possibility. So she kept moving, doing her best to keep busy so she wouldn't have to deal with the inevitable. She needed support, no doubt. She got it from my dad and my stepmother, but she could not physically exhale. She could not fully exhale because they weren't there in the evenings when my Uncle Adrian had pain and agony. When you're a caregiver, it can feel selfish to need support for yourself, but you are grieving too. It's a strange situation to grieve for someone who's still living. It really is. And that's why events like this are so important. We need them because you need a place to let it out, to be around people who understand that this entire situation does not seem fair. People who understand your exhaustion is so deep, right, that sleep is not gonna help, that you feel you've been robbed. We hear people quote that airplane safety mantra all the time, right? That in stressful situations, put your oxygen mask on before you put on someone else's. But what if your oxygen mask doesn't drop from that secret compartment above your head? What do you do then? What if you can't find it? What do you do when you can't breathe because this weight on your chest feels like you're just stifling, but you don't have time to deal with it because you're too busy feeling responsible for your loved one who's dealing with cancer? You get help. You are not expected to face all of this by yourself. There are amazing programs like ZERO that ZERO offers specifically for caregivers. And it sounds like there's this awesome site that Pfizer has that can support you and give you information to keep you going. You take time for yourself, even if it's just an hour or two, to do something you truly enjoy. If a friend or loved one offers support, you take it. Having a community around you is helpful, not just because of having a supportive group, but they also understand what you're going through. Sometimes they can offer resources you may not know that are available to you, from medications to transportation discounts, all kinds of awesome things, financial needs, you name it. When you have a community around you, there is more available to you. During my uncle's final days, my dad's primary care physician called him and told him that his blood sugar was dangerously high and he needed to go to the emergency room immediately. There, he was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, which again terrified me. How would diabetes impact his prostate cancer? And how had he suddenly developed diabetes? My dad was, he ate pretty healthy. I know he didn't eat the best during the times my uncle was in the hospital, but he was, not obese. Like, how did all of a sudden this type 2 diabetes just come up? It felt like it came out of nowhere. And could it have been triggered by my Uncle Adrian's illness? My Uncle Adrian passed away December 10th of 2018. And around this time, my dad was noticeably losing weight, which worried me. He would say stuff like, I look good, baby. No, I'm looking good. I was like, nah, Dad, no. You don't really look healthy, and I'm a little concerned. I knew, though, that sometimes people lose weight when they have diabetes, so I hoped that maybe it was connected to that. Thankfully, my dad, he was on top of his blood sugar, he was on top of maintaining his prostate cancer and monitoring it, and so he reassured me that the doctors didn't think he had any cause for concern. In May of 2021, my dad's PSA was elevated, so his doctor decided to do an MRI to make sure his cancer had not spread outside of his prostate. I remember being upset with him. Why didn't you just take this out in 2012 when you first were diagnosed? Now, almost 10 years later, you're still worrying about it spreading. I tried not to show my frustration, as I knew it was not helpful, but I was frustrated. Little did I know that the MRI of his prostate would inform us of a bigger problem. The MRI showed a mass on his pancreas and a possible secondary small mass on his kidney. His doctor believed he had approximately 6 months to live. I remember feeling like someone had just punched me in my stomach. I used to work in the medical field for many years before I became a filmmaker on the administrative side. So to me, pancreatic cancer was a death sentence. I didn't know anybody who had survived pancreatic cancer. And this just all felt like it wasn't fair. How could he have both prostate and pancreatic cancer? Who gets 2 different kinds of cancers? I had never heard of anything like this in my entire life. So I hit him with so many questions. What are they doing? What are they saying? Did your prostate cancer spread? Did it cause it? Are you getting chemo? My dad was just like, I don't have any answers. I don't know how to answer any of your questions. And I felt like what he did know was not sufficient. So once again, my siblings and I decided to go home to Washington to be with my dad. It was the week before Father's Day, and I hadn't seen my dad in person in a while. Now, we would speak on FaceTime, and as I mentioned, I noticed he was noticeably thinner, but when I first saw him, he met me at the airport and I saw him, I felt physically ill. My dad is a decent-sized guy. He's about 6'2", he weighed around 240, 250 pounds. When I saw my dad, he was down to 150 pounds. I tried to hide my shock when I hugged him, but when I felt his bones when we hugged, it really shook me. My dad had an appointment scheduled with his primary care neurologist, so I asked him if I could attend his appointments because I had questions that needed answering. I asked his urologist about doing further diagnostic testing. I mean, they found his pancreatic cancer by accident. What else are we going to do? Are we going to do a CT scan? Like, what else is scheduled? What else are we planning to have happen? His urologist said the mass on his pancreas was significant and encroaching on a major blood vessel to his colon, making it inoperable. He said he was referring him to an oncologist, but basically he should try to enjoy the time he had left as there's nothing more that could really be done. My dad and I walked out of that doctor's office, and I know my dad could tell that I was upset. He tried to reassure me. He told me he had accepted his fate. As we walked down that hall, he said he had lived a blessed life, and if God decided to take him or let him stay, he would accept either because he was a blessed man. Well, I was mad, and I didn't accept it. I did not share his sentiment, and I had no problems telling him that. I could not wrap my head around the doctor feeling like there was no further testing needed. It just didn't make sense to me. I told my dad we were going to have a family meeting. Now, I know it's a blessing that my dad and I could communicate like this. We could tell each other honestly how we felt. I know as a father, he feels it's his job to protect me. And he didn't want me upset, and I didn't want to show him that I was upset because I didn't want to add any stress to him. But in that moment, we were completely honest with each other, and you know what? It was okay. It was okay for me to tell him I was angry and for him to tell me he was content. It was totally okay. He understood why I was upset, and also knew that, he leaned on me a little bit because I had worked on the administrative side in the medical field, and because he knew I had worked on the documentary and had relationships with doctors and medical facilities. So all of a sudden, I got every MRI and lab test, and he was like, look at this and tell me what you think. I was just like, okay, well, with my limited knowledge, I think we need to call somebody, right? But at least he was open to share this information with me. And so we sat down and we had this family meeting, and when I said I wanted to have it, he didn't push back. He's a family man, and he had been very open about his diagnosis of both cancers with our family. But sometimes, part of being a support to a loved one means playing family mediator. Our family had been going back and forth about having this barbecue for Father's Day. Now, this is just after we're coming out of the pandemic. Some restaurants are open, some aren't, so that to vaccinate or not vaccinate dilemma was on the table. And we had been advised that if you weren't vaccinated, you shouldn't be around my dad. So this caused a huge divide in our family. Hearing firsthand that my dad had only 6 months to live, I was done with the arguing over to vaccinate or not to vaccinate. If this was going to be my dad's last Father's Day, he would get whatever he wants. So in front of all of them, I said, Dad, what do you want? And he said, even though he couldn't really eat, I want a barbecue and I want my family around me. So that's what we did. But I found it interesting that no one else stopped to even think to ask my dad what he wanted. Everyone was thinking about what was best for him, but no one, and they were all well-intended, wanting the best, right? But no one was stopping to think about that. Sometimes, when we care for our loved ones, we forget that they just might want something simple. And if we just turned and asked them, you'd find that what they really want isn't that grandiose. I was on a panel, and I heard one of the social workers mention that one woman that was dealing with breast cancer, all she wanted was a loose shirt. That's it. That's all she wanted. Everybody's arguing about doing all this stuff for her. She wanted a loose shirt. When my uncle was at the end of his life, even though he couldn't eat food at all, he is a foodie, so he wanted us to cook food, and then he wanted to watch us eat it. And he would do, how that taste, baby? Oh, that's so good, huh, baby? That tastes good, don't it? And I was like, Uncle, please, go get some grape soda to go with that. If you get grape soda, that's gonna go good with that. And he would just watch us eat food. But that's all he wanted, to laugh, to talk, and to watch us eat. It brought him joy. Once my dad told us what he wanted, I decided he gets whatever he wants. And those who weren't vaccinated, they were gonna have to wear masks, use hand sanitizer. Maybe you couldn't hug on him, but you got to be there because that's what he wanted. And you know what? It was fine. We kept him safe. He had a great time, and everything worked out beautifully. We also made sure that we got him a second opinion and got the help that he needed, right? And I told all of them this was not up for discussion. Now, I am not saying I handled all of that properly, but it was what my family needed to hear to stop arguing over superficial things. It got everyone in gear, and we were able to get my dad into MD Anderson Cancer Center, where we got rid of all those doom and gloom doctors. We got him off of chemo because that was making him deathly sick, unfortunately, and he was put on immunotherapy. He received treatment for not just his pancreatic cancer, but also his prostate cancer and his diabetes. And I'm blessed to say that my dad is still living today, almost 4 years after a 6-month prognosis. Over these years, though, there were moments when I didn't realize how much I was holding back. I threw myself into advocacy for my dad and for others, but rarely stopped to take a breath. It wasn't until a small comment from my sister made me realize how close I was to breaking under the weight of my own bottled up fears. The release came when I finally allowed myself to express what I had been hiding all along, my fear of losing him. To anyone here who has faced this journey or is supporting someone through it, I want to give you permission to breathe. Caregiving is emotionally exhausting, filled with moments of laughter, anger, sadness, and helplessness. It's okay to feel all these things. It's okay to need help. Your feelings are valid, and sharing them is part of healing. I want to thank you all for allowing me to share just a little bit of my family's journey with you. My hope is through my story, you'll find comfort, strength, and perhaps a little inspiration to keep pushing forward for yourselves and for your loved ones. I hope you all continue to enjoy the retreat, and thank you for having me.